Okay. So Raven is, I'll share my screen so that it's like it makes more sense. I'll show the entire screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So Raven is a chat app, basically, right? But it's built for enterprises and it's built primarily for ERP Next, right? And if you haven't heard about ERP Next or Frappe or other apps in that ecosystem, let me show that as well. So ERP Next is essentially an ERP, right? It's an open source ERP. It's made by a company called Frappe, based out of Mumbai. And that ERP is an enterprise resource planning software, right? You might have heard of companies like SAP and Oracle. These guys also make ERPs. Obviously, those are closed source commercial projects or products. This is an open source one. We use it ourselves, right? One of the things that we noted in the Frappe ecosystem, which has a lot of these apps, right? We don't use, like for example, we do not really use learning, right, directly. We use Frappe Cloud, Frappe HR, ERP Next, Insights, Game Plan. So when we were looking at this entire ecosystem, one thing that we noticed was that we were still using Slack, right? And the the beauty of this entire ecosystem that you see over here is that they're all interconnected or can be interconnected to each other, right? So, for example, Frappe HR and ERP Next are very well interconnected to each other. Insights, you can use whatever ERP data a business has. Insights can be used to pull data from it. But there is no chat app, that was being maintained, actively maintained. There was something called as Frappe Chat, I think, which is only supported till version 13. So, I mean, Rishabh from Frappe, he reached out to me. He said, they have this incubator program. Do you have some ideas? I gave him three or four very stupid, very small scale ideas. And then he said, think bigger. And then I was like, okay, you know what? We're paying for Slack. So actually, we weren't paying for Slack. Okay, so that's the story, right? We had Slack. Slack has certain limits on the free account, right? One of the limits is that they will only retain either up to 500 messages or up to the last 3 months of messages. So any messages that were sent before, that they are not shown to you. They're not really deleted. They're not shown to you. You need to pay. And so that was frustrating. The other thing was that it didn't integrate at all. Like unless you were a programmer, which we are, we could have built, plugins for Slack with Frappe, but there's no native integration. So I just suggested that okay, maybe we build a open source Slack built on top of Frappe. Rishabh liked the idea. Then we waited for FOSS Hack last year, 2023, and we started building it during FOSS Hack. We got support from both FOSS United and then eventually Frappe as well via the incubator program. And so, yeah, so that's how we started building it. The idea is that all of these companies that are using ERP Next or Frappe HR or any of these apps, right? They must be communicating amongst their team members, right? It's a very very common requirement. Most of these companies they use WhatsApp or Telegram to do it. More often than not, it's WhatsApp, right? One of the problems is that there's no interconnection. So let's say if I created, if I'm managing like purchases in ERP Next, let's say I'm running a factory, I'm managing, my purchase cycle, right? I can't talk to, let's say, the manufacturing head. I need to, either call him or there's a meeting or on WhatsApp, but I cannot refer to documents, etc. Within the Frappe ecosystem, right? I cannot say, hey, go look at this purchase invoice, and when the other user comes in, they see a link to that purchase invoice with the basic details or anything. I mean, we plan on building a whole lot more integrations, but the idea is that a chat app, if it's well integrated with an ERP system, can unlock more workflows. So that's the whole background and what we are building. Um, yeah. Okay. The next thing is that if you look at Raven, right? Again, it's a chat app. It's so the thing is that if you look at all the other chat apps, right, they usually have the same sort of structure, right? On WhatsApp, you have groups. On Discord, you have channels. On Slack, you have channels. On Raven, you have channels, right? So these are all channels. And then you can have types of channels that can be open, public, private. Open is that everyone's a member, everyone can send messages, read messages, right? Uh, Public is everyone can read the messages, but only a few people like who are members can send messages, right? If you want to send a message, you need to join that channel. And then private is that only people who have been added by the administrators, they can read and write messages, right? So those are, channels. Over here you'll see that the globe icon represents open channels, hash icon represents public. There'll be, if I created a private channel, it would be a lock icon, right? DMs are also a type of channel. It's just that they in the database we've just marked them as is direct message, right? DMs are by default private channels, right? So DMs are only between two people, and you can create channels, public, private, open, and you can then view the channel settings, members. You can add members to a channel, uh, and then you can you view files, search, the basics of a chat app, right? Um, Yeah, I guess that's pretty much about Raven. Where do we go next, Ria?
We can talk about how to the
Okay.
set up the
Yeah.
project. And I know it is also
Yeah,
the
that's
tricky part.
yeah, yeah, that's the tricky part. So Raven's built on Frappe framework, right? Let me pull up Frappe framework. So Frappe framework is a full stack uh, framework, right? It's got both back end and front end in it, obviously. It's full stack, it's batteries included. So what that means is that because Frappe comes out of the box with a lot of things, that also means that you need to set up a lot of things. Fortunately, that has gotten much easier recently. If you're on Linux or Mac, there are instructions available over here. If you go into docs and you go into installation, right? There are instructions for Mac OS and Linux. If you're on Windows, you can either try a Docker based setup, or you can try using WSL. I've seen people who use WSL to set up Frappe framework. And after Frappe framework is set up, setting up Raven is the easy part, right? Raven is just a one line command, but setting up Frappe framework is difficult. Um, so I'll only cover, Mac OS and Linux based, right? Because those are very similar to each other. The caveats are that you need to run version 15, right? So these are the requirements that you need: Node.js 18 and MariaDB 10.6.6, right? And if you look at, so if you what do I do? So these work very fine on Ubuntu, right? On Mac OS, I've seen that instead of using Homebrew, I just go to the Python website and download it. That's better. Git comes out of the box. Hopefully, you already have Git if you're contributing to open source. Um, Frappe framework also has Redis, right? It uses it for queuing, caching, all sorts of things. So you would need that. Now, the caveat that you need to take care of is that this shouldn't be Node 14. As I said, this should be Node 18,
Noting.
right? So this is one thing that you need to take care of, and then everything else you can follow these instructions, right? It's available on frappeframework.com. As I said on, so yeah, over here again, this is Debian or Ubuntu. On Ubuntu, don't do npm install 14, just do 18, right? And pretty much everything else is fine, right? Once you have all of these basic requirements, that's when you actually get to the Frappe stuff, right? Which is the bench. So to manage Frappe apps, right, there is another utility called as Frappe Bench. Frappe Bench manages your apps and your sites. I don't know if I need to go into detail about apps and sites, but what I would recommend is that before the hackathon, you should be able to complete this tutorial if you're not familiar with Frappe framework, right? This tutorial will cover everything. And if you even, if you want more resources, there is amazing resource available on Frappe School. So on Frappe School, there's this course, Full Stack App Development with Frappe Framework. I think you should definitely watch this. This is pretty long, right? I think these are like 3 hour courses for 3 to 4 days. But this will cover almost everything that you need to understand Frappe framework, right? But essentially, you would go set up your bench, right? Just bench in it, and then to install Raven, that's pretty simple. Uh, you just need to run this, right? You need to first get the app and then install the app on your site. You'll understand what apps and sites are, but that's pretty much it. And once this is done, then you can start, building on top of Raven. So the main part is setting up Frappe. For learning Frappe, I would say, go to frappe.school and go through this and also go through this Frappe framework tutorial, this one. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So what do we go next? Like we have covered installation in a like on my system, installing is pretty simple because I already have the prerequisites done, right? So I already have bench and everything on my system. So it'll take me 2 minutes to install, but that won't be the experience that most people go through. For most people, it'll be the prerequisites that take time, especially, when the MySQL never asks for a root password and then you have to figure out how to change the root password. I mean, those things, those will take time.
Don't remind me of all the pains I have to.
Yeah,
It's been, once the all the setting up Frappe and the bench, the setting up the prerequisites and the bench, as Nikhil said, is what takes up most of the time, and it's also a
yeah,
one-time setup. It
yeah,
usually, once it's all set up and done, it usually doesn't interfere with much of the work that comes up on.
yeah.
Hopefully didn't till now. And then yeah,
No,
and then afterwards, it's just setting up your app and then getting started with your code.
yeah,
So shall we now move to, by the way, so now we are actually going through the code walkthrough, like a generic code walkthrough in sense. So at this part, in case if anybody who's working on Raven as a partner project is here, or if anybody has any doubts incoming in between, you can either post it on the chats or keep it for the end of this code walkthrough, and you can um, put forward your doubts. So, Nikhil, shall we go forward with the walkthrough now?
yeah, yeah. Okay. So if you look at this application, this does not look like Frappe, right? Frappe looks like. Wait, do I have it set up? Let me see if my bench is running. It is running, right? Okay. So Frappe looks like this, right? If you make apps using Frappe, Frappe gives you the entire UI and everything. It looks like this. This is built using jQuery and Bootstrap. Now, the problem with this is that chat apps cannot be generic, right? Their UI is tends to be very, very different from, from let's say a simple form or something. Chat apps need to look like this. So this interface is built using React. And so we have this Frappe framework backend, which we use where we create these doc types, which are nothing but SQL tables, right? And we write all of our code, etc., like backend code in Python. That's your Frappe app. And then we also have a front end React app, right? Frappe has this ability to serve HTML pages, right? Custom pages. If you look at FOSS United's platform, it's all just custom pages. So similarly, what we do is that we take our React app, right? During the build process, when the bundle is created, right? So when this React app is compiled, all of the TypeScript, etc., is compiled, and the bundle is created of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we copy over those assets into the Frappe apps www directory, right, and serve it from there. And that is how the React front end gets served on the same site as the Frappe app. Now, when you're working on Raven, you need not focus on any of this because if you look at the code base, right, you'll see that the code base is divided into. So this, if you git clone Raven, this is what you get, right? You'll get Raven. This is the Raven folder, right? This is your Frappe
Uh,
app, basically. Yep. Is there any question?
no, no, I was, yeah, there is actually one. Did you
Okay.
use Frappe React SDK or instead use them as microservices?
Well, we used Frappe React SDK because we maintain it ourselves. So it would be pretty weird if we didn't use it. So yeah. And what do you mean by microservices? Why would you have microservices over here? Uh, I mean, it's not like a different front end, right? So it's just that okay. So what you're technically doing, right? So okay, let's look at this Raven code base for once, right? You will see this www directory. I can create a random page over here, right? And it will serve that random page, right, on that particular path. So if I go to mysite.com slash, xyz.html, right, I don't even have to do HTML, but slash xyz, it will open up that HTML file. What we are doing is that during the building process, right, if you look at a front end app and you look at the package.json, right, all we are doing is we are setting the base as different, right, and then we are copying the HTML entry. That's all we are doing. So we are saying, okay, when you build this app, instead of storing it in a dist container or an or an output container, whatever they do. Usually, they create a folder inside the React app itself, right? For which is not source controlled, right? We are telling it, okay, go to this particular base, right, and build it over there, and that we have configured over here in our read config. See, we are saying go back, go to Raven's public folder. Inside the public folder, go to Raven, right? And just dump your build outputs over there. So what that does is that when this React app is built, right, it dumps it into Raven's public folder over here, right? This, and this is not sourced. This is not checked into source control. Once that's done, right, and we also copy the HTML entry and we generate this HTML entry, which is the compiled, final HTML entry. Usually, single page apps usually have one HTML file, right? So that comes up over here, and that's pretty much it. That's all we do. So we are using the same backend. We are just instead of making this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript by hand using jQuery, we're using React. React compiles it into jQuery, or not jQuery, but JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, and then that vanilla JavaScript is served as is. That's pretty much what's happening. So no microservices or anything. Okay. Yeah. So if you look at the code base, it's split into two parts, right? You don't really have to worry about the other things, right? The only two things that you need to worry about is the Raven folder and the front end folder. The folder is the backend, front end folder is front end. So if you go to the Raven folder, you will see that this is like a standard Frappe app template, right? It's got hooks.py, some patches, some other Python files that we have. All of the whitelisted APIs are stored in the API folder, right? Now, this is not very clean as of now because one of the things that we are now doing is that we were earlier not storing all of our whitelisted APIs in an API folder. We were storing them in their respective doc types, but the paths were becoming too long. So what we've done is now we are moving to this API folder structure, and you'll see that some of these things are common, right? So Raven message.py might have the same, might have similar APIs as chatstream.py. Don't worry about that for now. All of the issues that we have noted, they wouldn't really care a lot about the file structure. uh, you'll know where to put things, and it's usually the tickets that we have added, they do not involve a huge lot of refactoring and all because that's our duty to do. So yeah, but all of the whitelisted APIs, if you create a whitelisted API, you can either create a new Python file, and by whitelisted function, I mean, it's like an API endpoint, right? So you can call it from the front end. Uh, all of those are available in API folder, and then none of these actually matter. You wouldn't really need patches. You wouldn't really need the public folder, right? Now these are all the modules that we have, and in these modules we might have doc types, right? So uh, yeah, and when you create a doc type, just pick the correct module. If it's an integration, go to Raven integrations. Usually in most of the tickets you'll be adding to existing doc types, so you don't really have to make that decision anyway. But this is again a very standard Frappe structure, right? All it's doing is that these are the modules. Let's say I've Raven user. Raven user has this entire structure, and then you can have you have the controller logic. So again, standard Frappe app, nothing fancy going on over here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So on the our even in even when we work on Raven, about 70 to 80% of the time we are working on the front end. The back end, because Frappe does so much of the heavy lifting, we actually almost never work on the back end except for making some simple APIs, some simple doc types, and some controllers. That's pretty much it on the back end side. So this part is going to be easy, but the front end part is where the main thing resides, right? So I'll tell you how to start Raven, right? How to start developing on Raven. I have this bench inside the Raven integrations directory. I'll just do bench start. Now, bench start will tell me which port it is running on. It's running on 8025 in my case. In if you're a new Frappe setup, it'll be 8000. Don't worry about that. I have 25 benches on my laptop, so it's 8025. But yeah, once you do that, you'll get somewhere over here. You won't see LMS and all because I have those apps installed. I only have, if you only install Raven, you'll see a very bare minimum, number of modules. Uh, and then, this will allow you to create doc types. Again, follow the course, follow the tutorials. You'll see all of that. This will, look at the doc types, and then you wouldn't really need anything else apart from doc types, I believe. Yeah, yeah, that's kind of funny. Yeah, you won't really need anything apart from doc types to build on Raven, right? So this is your localhost 8025. Now this is just the Frappe server running and the Frappe's front end running. If I go to localhost 8025 slash Raven, you'll see that the built output is Raven, but this won't allow you to code live, right? What that means is that usually we are accustomed to, we change the code, we go back to our browser and we look at the updated output, right? This is the built output, so this won't work with the hot reload that Wheat offers. So for that, we need to start another server, right? And that you can start. So I'm on the bench. I go to app slash Raven. So let me show you. So a typical Frappe bench looks like this, right? Nothing new. And then if you go to the apps directory, right? I have these apps installed on my system. The ones that we recommend you to install are, I mean, you would obviously install Raven. Frappe comes out of the box when you install Bench. You would install Raven. We would recommend you to install Frappe types. Frappe types is especially if you're changing doc types or creating new doc types, right? So Frappe types is, so what Frappe types does is that it will create TypeScript types for you, right? Whenever you create a new doc type or you update an existing doc type, it will automatically update the TypeScript type definition for you in the path that you define, right? In our case, that path is, let me see if it's here or not. Hmm. Okay, this is an older one. Yeah. In our case, the types are defined over here in src slash. So you would just do front end slash src in your type generation settings. It's recommended, not mandatory to be honest, right? But yeah, good to know. And then if you want to quickly create like, 10,000 messages, which I don't think you would need to. But if you wanted to create 100 users and 10,000 messages or something, you can install Night King. It's a very dumb app. Just if you install it, then you'll see Night King. Yeah, I mean, I use it to test performance, etc. Right? There's really nothing in this. If you once you install Night King, just go to Night King, right? And then number of dummy users to create, and it will create that many dummy users. Sometimes I use it to test, with like 10,000 users, how the app is performing. Up until now, it performs very well with 1,000 to 1,500 users. After that, it becomes a little slow, but I don't think you'll need it anyway. So yeah, now so if I go to Raven, right? So that'll be cd app slash Raven. This is the directory that I was opening, I mean, that I had opened in my VS Code, right? Uh, what I need to do is that I need to go to the front end directory and then just do yarn dev. So remember, there is a server bench start, right? And then there is this React hot reload server, right? That Vite is running. Uh, it will usually run on 8080 unless this port is not busy. If it's busy, then it'll run on 8081 and so on. So now if I go to localhost 8080, okay. So localhost 8080, now this is like, live, it's a live server. If I make any changes to my front end, so let's see, what do I change? Maybe I go to channel, DM channel header, and then let's open a DM. Yeah, I have a DM open, right? So let's say if I comment out this user avatar, right, it goes away. So now you have live reload, right? So that's why you need the other server. Otherwise, you'll be driven nuts by running, bench build all the time. So yeah, that's. Let me open up the code base now. Okay. So again, in the front end folder, this is a standard React app. You wouldn't need to touch anything except for the contents inside SRC folder, right? The SRC folder has hooks, components, pages, types, utils, and then it's got a bunch of basic files, right? Again, you wouldn't need to touch app.tsx or main.tsx for most of these tickets, right? If you wanted to add a new page, we're using React router, and you can just add a route over here, just like we have done for a lot of things, right? Most of the time what you'll see is that you will need to look at other components and other pages that we have created and sort of follow the pattern, because that's what we do. We don't really have a very detailed uh, list of or maybe let's say strict rules like, oh, these files need to go in there and those files need to be named like that. We don't have that, but we try to follow a pattern so that it's not a mess. um, Maybe someday we'll have a very corporate style uh, pattern, and then we'll spend like 3 weeks in code review, but that's not how it is structured right now. You'll actually notice that this React app, since the last 1 year, when we started, we were using Chakra UI, and we knew less than we know now. We switched to Radix UI in between. We have done a lot of performance improvements. We've made a lot of performance improvements, as well as added and removed features, right? So the code base has evolved, and sometimes you'll see that we do not follow our own patterns, because then we decided to change the pattern because we noticed, oh, okay, this doesn't really make sense. One of those patterns, I don't know if we have that somewhere over here, index.ts. Yeah, so let's look at this pattern, right? Index.ts file. Earlier what we used to do was we used to have a folder, and have components in it, and then we used to export all of those components via the index.ts file. These are called as barrel files, Then we read somewhere that barrel files are not really good when when it comes to the compiler bundling your files. So we decided to get rid of it. Obviously, we couldn't get rid of it in a in one shot, right? So we are removing it step by step, step by step. So you'll notice that some places have barrel files. Don't use them, right? Do not export it like that. Just do default exports from your files, right? So for example, over here, you see this in index.ts file is empty. It's not exporting anything. It used to export all of these things. We got rid of it. So again, index.ts files, we're not using them. So those are some things, but again, if you look at folder naming, right, it's a mess as well. Earlier we were doing all small with dashes in between. Now we have gone to camel case, back to camel case. So again, follow camel case, right, because those are the new files. But to be honest, it doesn't really matter, right, because those things are not really going to prevent you from actually building the feature that you want to build. Those things will just be in code review. We'll just tell you, hey, change the folder name, right? But the main goal should be to actually deliver value. It doesn't really matter what those file names, etc., are. Okay, I'll just quickly cover the tech stack. So the things that we're using, right? We are using Frappe React SDK for Yeah. So we are using Frappe React SDK, right? The documentation is not very up to date, but if you want to actually look at the documentation, just go to SRC, and in lib, there is this index.tsx file. In fact, even in VS Code, you will get all the documentation auto-completed because we're using JS docs everywhere, right? You'll see that everything is very well documented, including each and every parameter and each and every hook. Um so, all these use Frappe get doc, etc. These are very well documented. So, yeah, we are using Frappe React SDK to interface from the Frappe backend, right? Frappe React SDK uses something called as SWR, which is built by Vercel. It's open source. It's a library for data fetching. We use this so that it handles caching for us, optimistic updates, etc. Right? Most probably in all of the tickets that we have, you wouldn't have to worry about it because you know, this is under Frappe React SDK, right? So you'll be using Frappe React SDK for the most part. So, but good to know that SWR is being used. For design, we are using Radix UI themes. We're not using primitives. We are using Radix UI themes, right? Radix UI themes has a bunch of components. For example, alert dialog, similar, right? Badges, buttons, etc. You can use any of these. For icons, we actually rely more on taste. Now, this is something that Jamvi is, fond of. I mean, in my opinion would be to just use something like Lucid, which has a lot of icons, right? But usually we do not find all kinds of icons in let's say one icon pack, right? So it's a matter of taste. We usually look at React icons and we search for an icon. So if we were looking for a globe, we just search for globe, right? And then we look at whatever will look best on Raven. It's a matter of taste, really, right? Now, in our case, I'm not sure what we are using. We might be using Lucid's globe, or we might be using FI globe, or we might be using something else altogether. Let me actually search, what we are doing. Get channel icon. Yeah, oh, yeah, we are using BI, right? So even not that. So it's BI, well, BI globe, right? BI, I think, stands for box icons, right? So we're using this one for our open channels. So it's a matter of taste, right? Usually what we're doing is that usually we're using box icons and feather icons, FI and BI, right? But if you like some other icon and you think that that looks much better, right? Go for it. Again, wouldn't really stop you from shipping the feature icons. Anyway, Java is going to change all the icons eventually. Doesn't really matter. But again, good to know that BI and FI, so box icons and feather icons, that's from the React icons library, right? On Radix, if you look at our theme, let me see. Yeah, if you look at our theme, this is all Radix. We have added a font called as Cal Sans, right? That's made by the team at cal.com. So we again, these are again, added into the code base, so you wouldn't have to worry about it. Just, look at some other model and create your own model, and that should be fine, right? Uh, and again, if you look at our mobile app, so mobile responsiveness, in this, you'll see that plus now turns into a drawer, right? For this, we are using wall. So this is wall. We are using that, right? So because on mobile we wanted to give it a more native feel, right? So again, look at other dialogues and pop-ups, and you'll know what to do, right? Then let's look at wall icons done. Okay, in terms of color scheme, just refer to the tailwind config.js file. Right? So over here we have noted all of these color schemes. We have used Radix's color tokens, and these are the color schemes that you need to use. Right? More often than not, you wouldn't really need to play around with it a lot. Right? Again, remember that Raven supports dark mode. So whatever UI changes or whatever UI features that you create, they need to be supported on both light and dark mode. Uh, that's another thing. What else? Okay, yeah, for toasts, we are using another innovation by Emil Kowalski, which is Sonar. We use Sonar for toasts, right? You'll see that it's pretty simple to use it, right? Just toast.message or whatever you want to do, right? For in our code base, so actually let's look at package.json front end, right? So we have Radix UI. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this. We're using TipTap for our editor where you type in your messages, right? We're using CalSans font. We have CLSX and class variance authority for combining Tailwind classes. Day.js for all day operations. All the day operations will be available in utils, right? So if you look at utils date conversions, we have all of these, right? Standard date, get date, month, year. We all have all of that, and there's a utils file that converts all of the time zones, etc. So that's also done. Okay, sometimes you might want to use, let's say, emoji picker and all of that. Again, that's available in components. In components, we have emoji picker, right? So that's there. If you ever need it, I don't think that you'll actually need it, right? Error banners, etc., are over here. Call outs, error call out. Again, for all of these, just check somewhere else where it's being used, right? Um, and remember, whenever you're fetching any data or you're updating any data, just handle the loading states and handle the error states. That's very important. Frappe React SDK will give you whether there is an error or whether the request is loading, etc. So all you need to do is handle that in the UI. Yeah. So again, components, there are common components. Some of these are feature, specific to a particular feature, right? And then we've got layout components as well. Uh, if you were to look at, if you were to figure out, okay, how do I use a particular component, just search for it, right? So for example, you can just search for error banner and just search for it and you'll see, so many places where it's being used, right? I mean, that's usually how I also work because I work on multiple code bases and multiple code bases have different, components. So, uh, yeah. The other thing that you can, okay, what else should I cover over here? I mean, pages go into pages, hooks go into hooks. Uh, hmm. I guess that's pretty much it, right, in terms of the code base, or do you have any questions, etc.?
In sense, I actually think it was a pretty good code walkthrough. And I also got some pointers of things that we could actually use in our platform in a way, especially Night King. So, on context, we were also actually thinking about, you know, improving our test cases and creating dummy users in a case. So,
Yeah.
found inspiration from Night King.
No, I actually created Night King because obviously I cannot create 10,000 users by myself, right? So in fact, if you if you look at this, in this case, I don't have users. This is a new bench, right? What Night King will do is that it will actually create fake names with photographs and everything, with profile pictures, etc., right? And then I tried Raven after creating like 10,000 users, and it just did not work. Because it was loading all of the users from the database. Then I looked at, profiler, etc. I I don't know if people are aware, in Frappe there's something called as recorder, right? So you can start recording, all of your web requests, etc., all of your SQL queries. And then I looked, okay, I'm fetching the Raven user list every time, 10,000 users from the database. So we added caching, and then it started to work. Then we looked at, okay, whenever we mention at, it was showing 10,000 users and the app was crashing again. So then we tried to, paginate and filter, etc. So, it's very, very helpful to actually generate a lot of dumb data because you cannot test on your production instance,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that's yeah. The other thing that if you are not aware of the database structure, because in Frappe we have doc types, you can use something called as commit. And just I'll just go to try commit and Raven, and let's see, view ERD for Raven, and let's do the develop branch. Okay, so you can look at all the let me see if we have what did we need? Raven channel number, Raven channel. Okay. So see, you can view your doc types in a database diagram if you wanted to, right? This is available on commit.frappe.cloud. Sometimes it's helpful to understand how the relationships are mapped, right? So this could also be a part of documentation, and you can click on it and view all of the fields, etc. in it, right? So yeah. So this is one thing, and then in commit we also have something called as an API Explorer, right? This will tell you all of the whitelisted APIs that are available in Raven. So for example, this is an API to save a message, right? And this is the code for it, as well as the endpoint. So again, you can use this, um, yeah,
Cool. All right. So I think since we are a little bit short of time, let's quickly move on to, discuss a few issues. If there are any doubts,
right.
please post it on the chat and we'll cover it up.
Okay, so the FOSS hack issues are first of all labeled as FOSS hack, right? Um, okay, so if you look at most of these, right, some of these are very simple, right? I'll cover the easiest one, which I believe is the easiest one, is an add 404 page on web app, right? This is basically, if you look at Raven, and if you go to some random page, right, like this, not this, but yeah, like something like that. Yeah, it gives you this page, which is not really, user friendly, right? So there should be a 404 page. We're using React routers, so all your task is to figure out how do we add 404 pages, design the 404 page using Radix UI, and add that as a path to Raven, right? This one's pretty simple. Ability to pin messages in a given channel. Now, this is a little complicated, wherein you have to work on a doc type. right? You need to store somewhere, you need to store what channel has what messages pinned. And then you also need to work on showing those pinned messages, making it responsive, making it work on both mobile and laptops. Um, so yeah, ability to pin messages in a given channel. Hint over here, I would say that pinned messages can probably go in the channel doc type as a child table. Um, and then you can have an API to fetch those messages, like join the message ID with the message content and show it, just like how Telegram does it. So yeah, then we have add an unsave button on messages in the save messages page, right? So this is a pretty simple one. Um, so if you look at commit over here, we have this save message, right? You can actually have a message, you can change this API to be like toggle save message, and it will automatically toggle or remove the message. Save messages are shown over, yeah, save messages are shown over here. If I save a message like this, yeah, so it says view in channel, but I have no way to unsave it from here, right? I'll have to go to this message, right, and then unsave it. So yeah, that's the that's the task, that you add an unsave button over here, make it look pretty. Um, some of these we don't know ourselves how to fix. Handle emoji in social link preview texts, right? We fixed a little bit of it, right? We fixed it for Twitter and all, but I think even in some cases, YouTube is sometimes giving those emojis correctly, sometimes it's not. So these are, in my opinion, a little difficult to fix. Uh, Allow user setting to select preferred theme for the user. Now this is pretty cool. Uh, we have that in some way, right? Over here, users can select, right? But this does not allow the user to select system. So what we want is that on the settings page, maybe over here, we can have a theme uh, page, right? And then the user can select the theme, right? So if it's system, and you don't have to worry about actually toggling the theme because you only need to set it in local storage. Um, Radix UI already supports system, so system light or dark. What we like is cal.com's theme switcher. Let me log in and see if they. Settings. So if you look at their settings, they have appearance over here. See, we like something like this, right? Pretty cool. So, if you can build something like this, that'll be awesome. So, yeah, that's user. Okay. System messages for addition, removal of users from a channel. So, on Raven, if you add a user to a channel, so let's say I'll create a new channel, yes, private channel, let me do that. Yeah, and let's say if I, add a member to this channel, right? It doesn't really show, that this user added this user to the channel. So what you could do now, this is a very complicated task, but what you could do is that you can have, system messages stored in the messages as a message itself and use the same API to fetch them, right? So pagination, etc., you wouldn't have to worry about. You just have to worry about storing it, sending it over here, and displaying system messages in a different UI, right? So again, look at other apps, other chat apps, because that's what we do. We look at other chat apps and we try to, pick the best features that are available in those apps, right? We do not want to really reinvent the wheel. We want to reinvent the wheel in other places, not in creating a basic chat app. So um, yeah, and yeah, this one's a pretty frustrating one. I would really hope that someone does it. Right, show all reactions on a message grouped by emoji with the count and usernames in tabular format. I'm not fond of the tabular format thing. Javi thinks that will work, but um, basically, what's happening is that let's say if I react over here, right, on desktop you can view it like this. right? But on mobile, what happens is that there's no hover state as such, right? What we want is that on right click or when you do this, right, there is a action that says view reactions. And then that opens up a pop-up on desktop. On mobile, it will open up a drawer, right? And it will show the reactions. You can look at
Discard, right?
how WhatsApp handles it. Yeah, how Discord handles
Discard
it,
handles
how
it.
WhatsApp handles it. So that is a that's a very simple feature to do, to be honest, because it's only React. You don't have to work on the backend at all. You don't have to make any APIs, right? You already have all of that data within the message itself. You just have to show it on the UI. So that'll be pretty cool if you can do that. Um, Ability to jump to a date from the date separator, this is not easy. This is by far, I think, with integration with Google Meet and the ability to jump, these are the most difficult out of the two, right? In this, what we want, what we expect is you can click on this, change the date, and it will scroll all the way to that date, right? So you have to
Oh,
actually look at, uh, yeah, go ahead.
no, nothing else. Nothing happened actually.
Okay, so there's chatstream.py. There are multiple uh, APIs over there, right? And there's also test chatstream.py. You'll have to go through this particular API to figure out, okay, how are we going to get messages till that end, right? Uh, and that's honestly that's the most difficult ticket out of all of these. So yeah, that's one more, and then ability to create, rename, delete channel groups. Okay, this is a new feature. The requirement really is that currently we do not really have a channel group, right? So Frappe started using Raven, a while ago, and then they stopped using it. One of the main requests was that we don't want, we want to group these channels into subgroups, right? So these are all channels, yes, but I might have a group for, let's say, the HR department. I might have a group. So in the HR department, I can have multiple channels, but still grouped as HR, right? So they wanted it to be grouped. I think Slack uses this, Mattermost uses this. So this would be a pretty cool feature as well. One thing that you need to take care of is that we have about 130 users, right? 130 sites on Frappe Cloud that are using this, more that are, self-hosting this. This cannot be a breaking change. So we need to migrate, channels, right? So this is that, right? So you have channel groups, and then within channel groups, you have channels shown on the sidebar. Integration with Google Meet is just API work, really. But the idea again is I go over here and I say, create a meeting, right? See, one thing that we have to do a lot is that we'll go to Google Meet, we'll generate a link, right? And then we'll share it on a channel, right, for everyone. Uh, and that's kind of frustrating. Instead, if we had a Google Meet integration, all we had to do was, create Google Meet, and you can schedule it or whatever, and then you just say yes, and it sends the link over here. So it's not going back and forth between two, three different applications, right? So that's the requirement for that ticket. Uh, I think we've covered a lot of these. So
Uh,
yeah.
so a curious question that I had is yet, what is the what is on the roadmap for the Raven team in the upcoming time?
So, performance and stability, that's one. But the main thing is more deeper integrations with Frappe's other apps, right? So, one thing that we shipped recently was, this whether someone is on leave or not. Now, this particular user is not on leave, right? But let's say that, you were a 100-member team, right? We've seen on Microsoft Teams, if someone has marked it as out of office, they actually show a banner that this so and so is out of office. We also wanted to do the same, so we show whether a particular person is on leave or not over here. That's one integration. The other integration was that whenever a new department is created, create a channel automatically, right? So in integrations we have over here. So there are more integrations that we want to add, with Frappe education, let's say, teachers and students. So teachers create an assignment and notification goes on Raven to all the students that this is a new assignment that you need to do, right? If a fee is due, you get notified, so on and so forth. There are more things in the pipeline, right, which I'm working on, but those are still hush hush. We'll
Mm.
probably announce them in October.
Yeah, so we have another question.
Yeah.
Yeah, two questions in fact. Can you explain in short what is expected exactly in handling emojis in social link in preview text?
Yeah, so what you need to do, so look at the bug report, right? I think it was by Hussein. Yeah, okay. You see these characters, these were supposed to be, I think, sparkles, right? Like the sparkling emoji. But the when we tried fetching the meta, it came up like this. I think what's happening is that, so again, look at the API for that. It'll be it's a preview link, right? So get preview link. Okay, so I think what's happening is that when this link preview library that we are using, right, is going to fetch, that YouTube response, right, the emojis, they're being encoded. And that encoding, it's not well being decoded, right? So see, description might have emojis in them, which comes in with special characters like, copyright, etc. It's very random, right? So again, as I said, this is very difficult to figure out because you have to debug it, right? One thing that I'll recommend, just as a warning, we are caching link previews. So you'll have to disable the cache over here, right? I think what you can do is you can, to disable the cache, just go do this and, just set data to none and then remove this when you actually create a PR, right? Do this and, you know, then, check because otherwise it will just read from the cache. So even if you make any changes, it wouldn't matter, right? So yeah, that's uh, that's what you need to do. You need to figure out how do I replace those special characters, or can I use some other, for example, for Twitter.com or X.com because of Elon, right? We are using iMessage bot as in header, right? Maybe the iMessage bot works uh, for the YouTube preview links, right? And for this, to test out a link, you can use this link. Just search on Build with Hussein, just search for Frappe CRM live release, and you'll find the link to that YouTube video and check, whether this is coming up or not. That's one. The other, also some thoughts on thumbnail preview issue. What's that? Thumbnail preview issue. Okay, label, FOSS Hack. Thumbnail preview. Which issue is that? Oh, okay. Yeah, this is so okay. So if you send a PDF file, right, on let's say a Slack, let's see if I have, yeah, let's look at this, right? So if you send, PDF file, we just show it like this. What we would ideally want is like the first page of that PDF, we convert it to an image and we generate a thumbnail and we show that thumbnail over here instead, right? So like a quick preview or something. We have a preview over here, like this, but ideally we would want like a thumbnail preview just like they do in Slack. Now, what you need to do is you need to build that feature, but we ourselves need to decide whether it's worth it or not. Because if we are storing it in memory, then maybe the cost of that is higher than the advantage or the benefit that we get. But nonetheless, if you manage to build this feature, we'll obviously accept it. So
All right. I think
any
that's
other questions?
um
No, I don't think so. Okay.
Um, yep. I guess that's pretty much it. And we got a little bit extended. Oh, no, we actually have another query.
About the thumbnail, I kind of made something like this in Frappe. Let me try it. Okay, sure.
All right, so I guess that we have come to a close of the doubts, and we can actually sort of wind up the session too. But and thank you so much, Nikhil, for you know
Yeah,
giving us
no
the
worries.
code walkthrough in such a good format. It was crisp, it was on point. Some of the things went into detail, some of the things were point, and it was pretty much, it was really engaging, and thank you so much for that. And for those who have actually proposed to work on issues on Raven, if you have them assigned, you can enlist the project on your hackathon dashboard. And this is the final week towards the hackathon, and I'd recommend you get started with your navigating through the code base, plan what you're planning to do so that you're quite ready to get your commits done and work done during the hackathon hours and submit your PRs. All right. So, yep, that's pretty much it. If we don't have anything further, we can wind up the session.